Good evening. I'm Gil Schultz. I'm Chair for the Public Works Committee. Tonight we'll begin with a roll call.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn. Here. All members present.
On the agenda for tonight, we have first off the review of snow removal practices and policies, and then a follow on code enforcement. To begin with, we'll start with some remarks from Director Schrage.
Thank you, Councilmember Schultz. So tonight, I have Operations and Maintenance Division Manager Brian Heath here with us tonight. He'll go over our snow removal practices and policies, kind of how this overall presentation is structured is kind of throughout the beginning of the year and how we go through training and then how we deal with an event. This includes all public property, streets, public parking lots, adjacent sidewalks, so on and so forth. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Heath.
Thank you, Chase. Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. So tonight, what I'd like to do, and I appreciate the opportunity to go over our complete snow and ice control policy. This is, like Chase mentioned, this is for review purposes only. We're looking to give you an overview of all that and show you some costs that we incurred over this winter we're coming out of. And not looking for any action tonight, but we'll go ahead and get started. I want to start at the beginning. I want to talk about our preparation, which is very important to us. All the work we put into this prior to any snowflakes flying in the fall or winter time. So basically in September or a little bit before, the street supervisors get together. They go through our manual that each employee has. They update all of the information in that, including employees, equipment. They look at the past season and what we've done good, what we've done bad. They take that into consideration. Maybe we need to change some routes around. Maybe we need to get some personnel in some different areas. So they're going to look at all of that before we get into our actual snow and ice control training with the staff. So they're busy doing this early on in the fall. The next step for us in October, we get all the equipment ready. We put the spreaders on this, and any of the material spreading capabilities these trucks have. All of that equipment's installed. We don't necessarily need the plows at that time, but because they're so easy to hook up. But they have everything else ready prior to our meeting again. And then we roll into the meeting, and what we do there, we have a 2-day comprehensive training that takes place with all the staff, everybody that's involved with snow removal. That's supervisors. That's employees, all of O&M employees, and we also have some water reclamation staff that we work with on snow and ice control. So the training that we do, it includes going over all of the routes with the staff. We go through safety. We go through new streets, subdivisions that may be coming on board, streets that may be closed. For example, 27th Street with the high school being built. We're going to talk about all those things. Especially safety. We're going to talk about items such as how to curb snow with the new guys or the new staff members. We're going to want to make sure that they get a good idea of what we're looking at when we go out there, what we want them to accomplish. There's other things that take place after we're done with the classroom. We'll go out. Each employee will get in their unit. They'll go through it from head to toe and make sure all the lights are working, make sure their capabilities for spreading are all there, all the hoses are hooked up, things like that. We also get into calibration of all the equipment during this time. So with the spreading capabilities that we have, we want to make sure that they're calibrated and ready to go when they're putting out the proper amounts of material. Further, some of the staff that's on new routes, what they're going to do is they're going to go out on the roadways. They're going to take a look before the snow flies and see what's out there, see obstacles that they got, bump outs. They're going to look at roundabouts, things like that may be new, and they're going to go through the routes and make sure they do all of that. So that to us is very important to make sure all of our staff's on board with that, and they're all know what their equipment's going to be when the snow flies. They know what they're going to be doing, getting in that truck, hooking up that plow and going. Next thing we'll do is we'll go out and we'll put up snow fence in high wind areas. On the windward side, typically high wind areas such as Union Road, Center Street, Lone Tree Road. There's areas like that. Saves us countless hours in drift control because the snow fence takes care of it for us. We typically place that about 140 feet back from the roadway, and we're very appreciative of the farmers and the landowners that allow us to do that. Next, we put out sand barrels. We got a select few areas now that we put out sand barrels. Historically, sand barrels were placed we probably had 30 locations 30 years ago. Now we have 5 locations where we put sand barrels, critical locations where you have an incline to an arterial street or something like that. And the reason we don't put so many out now is because all of our equipment now is outfit with spreading capabilities, where 30 years ago we didn't have that. We didn't have that luxury. So that's kind of why we've reduced the amount of sand barrels. Our coverage, we have over 520 lane miles that we take care of. That's collectors, arterials, residentials. We have 10 municipal parking lots that we take care of, 7 public building parking lots. City parks, there are several of those that we do. We have 3 cemeteries that we have to plow the streets on. And then we have approximately 20 miles of recreation trails and sidewalks that we do. Our team, we got 6 public works supervisors that rotate the call on a weekly basis. They're all part of the group in our public works park supervisors, and they are salaried employees, so they're first in, last out typically when we have a snow event, who's ever on call. If we have a situation where we just need to go out and treat arterial streets, typically 1 or 2 of them will handle that. If we have a full plow situation, we may have 2 to 3 supervisors in. Our plow operators are important staff out in the field. We got them divided into 2 groups. These are hourly employees, men and women that rotate every week on call. The only incentive they really have is the overtime that they receive during the hours that they work after regular hours. So we're very grateful that they're dedicated to their work and they show up when we need them. It's very important. Couldn't do it without them. Public safety is another team member of ours. They're our eyes during the night. They also help us out. We'll be in contact with them before the snow, after the snow, let them know what we're doing. They're going to let us know what they're seeing, and especially those events that come up unexpectedly in the nighttime, they're going to be there letting us know, hey, we need your help. We need you to get you out there. So we're very appreciative of all the work they do for us. Full plow operations, we utilize all of the O&M staff. That includes parks, that includes refuse staff, that includes, of course, street staff. We have typically 2 mechanics in, and then our parks and cemetery staff. We also use 4 employees from the Division of Water Reclamation. So it's quite a team that we put together. And all these folks, like I said, they're in on our training at the beginning of the year. In all, we got 37 operators, 2 to 3 mechanics typically, and 2 to 3 supervisors on the full plow operation. How do we contact these folks? Dialing a phone for each individual could be very time consuming. So staff came up with what we call Text-em-all. It's a subscription program where they can send out a text to every employee instantaneously. So all staff that's included with snow and ice control are going to get this text, or staff that we need for the period of time. They're going to be getting this text, and then they respond likewise whether they can make it or not. So that is a huge time saver that the supervisors came up with and implemented. Some of the decision-making factors that we utilize, every storm's different. I mean, you've got your warm snows that come that turn to cold temperatures. You got snow like we've received the past couple of events where we had to hardly do anything. So there's so many factors involved in when we decide to go out. Intensity of the precipitation, the forecast duration of precip. What type of precip do we have? Freezing rain? Do we have snow? Do we have, what is it that's coming down? The time of day, the day of week, it's very important. We're going to focus on the commutes. The morning commute, the evening commute is going to be our key focus. The wind speed, of course, we've got to factor that in. That's going to dictate to us what we're going to use for material, if we're going to spread any material. If we got wind blowing across the road, we want to keep it blowing across the road. We do not want to put material down, moisten up that pavement, and get the snow to stick to it as it's crossing the street. Air temperature is a big one. Occurrence of the last snowfall. What do we got down on the pavement now? Is there residual snow from the previous snowfall? We're going to factor all that stuff in. And again, availability of personnel, equipment, and materials is going to factor into what decisions we make and when we make them. Our goal for that, our primary goal during the initial action, we want to provide expedient and efficient service to our priority 1 and priority 2 streets. That's our number 1 goal. We want to keep the commute going. We want to keep our arterials open. From that point, then we'll go to our to our residential clearing. That's typically our second goal. If we get anything over 3 inches, we're probably 90% sure we're going to be out there doing residentials. And then lastly, clearing of recreation trails and sidewalks is going to take place. Excuse me. General guidelines. Based on those factors I just mentioned, this is where we're going to decide what to do. So, but we use a general guideline. We may be out prior to a snow dropping salt brine on the roadway. Anti-icing is what the term is used for that. That's applied prior to an event coming in. We're going to look at those factors and determine if it's a benefit for us to do that. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. There's a lot of things you got to consider for that. Trace to 3 inches, we're going to go out there and we're going to apply chemicals, and if we got a glaze of snow over the roadway, we probably won't drop the plows, but if we've got any accumulation whatsoever, we're going to scrape that material off while we're putting our de-icers down. We're going to focus on priority 1s and 2s during that time with that 3-inch snowfall. 3 inches or more, that's typically going to generate a full plow for us. Obviously, we're going to go back out and we're going to hit the priorities again, and then we'll be going into a full plow with residentials. Again, we're going to look at all them decision-making factors if we're going to do a full plow. At that 3-inch range, if we know the temperatures are coming up, for example, we may not do the residential streets. If we know we may have 2 inches of snow and then realize that the temperatures are going to turn bitter cold the next week or whatever, we're going to go out there and we're going to clean them residential streets off. We don't want that residual ice on there. We don't want the rutting and stuff and snow accumulation like that. And what that does also for us, if we get it off early, it saves us a lot of time coming back, applying material to icy intersections. We do not have a bare pavement policy on our residential streets. We make every effort to have bare pavement on our arterial streets for the reason I just mentioned. We want to make sure we get that ice off the streets. We don't want to have to come back and time and again put material down and try to break up that bonded ice on the pavement. Timeline for a typical snow, 3 to 6 inches. Onset of the snow, we're going to be out, like I said, we're going to be out on arterial streets, we're going to be on residential streets. Typically we'll go through and plow the entire city that first day, depending on the timing, of course. It may be late at night, we may not start till early the next morning, but we're going to plow the entire city. Typically takes 8 to 10 hours for that. Then day 2, we're going to hit calendar parking. We're going to plow back areas where vehicles have moved. We're going to go out and push back roadways. We're going to finish up parking lots and do that kind of thing on the second day. We're going to also be out doing our public sidewalks and begin trail work. Day 3 is kind of the same. We're still kind of pushing back intersections. We're going to wing back snow for additional storage. We try to push that snow back in the outerlying areas so that we have room to store it once we get an additional snowfall. We're going to do 40-hour parking enforcement, working closely with public safety on that. That's about the time that kicks in. We're also going to be out again. We're going to be out on our trails. We're going to be out doing whatever we have left of parking lots, as well as trails and what have you. Day 4, that's when we start looking at hauling snow. We've got our equipment typically prepared. At the end of day 3, we're going to go out and usually overnight. If we're having to haul snow, we're going to start typically 11 o'clock. We've got public safety again. They're helping us out with no parking and invoking our snow ordinance so that we can clear the downtown, the College Hill area without any troubles. They're typically overnight hours, and then the next day, several of the staff will go home and rest, and then we'll keep a couple around, and they'll go back out and do residual cleanup here and there, mostly trail cleanup at this time. And then we'll continue with parking lots, day 5, trails if we still need to, and then day 6 we'll be restocking materials, we'll be maintaining equipment, and anything that's left over. So that's kind of a general overview of a common event or a normal event that we don't see any additional snowfall for a while. When we're servicing the arterial streets, they typically require 12 to 14 operators, and that takes about 4 to 5 hours to complete, and that's depending on how much snow we're getting, what kind of blowing snow we're getting, things like that. But typically 4 to 5 hours they can get through the arterial streets, and that's the collectors and the higher speed roadways. And in full plow events, they're going to require anywhere from 8 to 12 hours to complete. That's with a full allotment of staff. Just a quick look at our arterial roadways, priority 1s and 2 streets. The red streets you see here are DOT jurisdiction. That would include First Street, that would include Highway 20, and of course the corridor of Highway 58 going through town. The green is what we would consider our priority 1 and 2 streets. The routes, we've got 15 residential routes that we take care of. They're broken up. Some have 2 staff, 2 plow operators per route. Some of them have 1. We also implemented something a few years back where we send out smaller trucks in the cul-de-sacs, and that's proven to be a huge time saver. It keeps our larger trucks en route. The smaller trucks can maneuver more freely in them cul-de-sacs. They get them opened up, and then our trucks don't have to mess around with them. For a regular dump truck, for example, to do a cul-de-sac would take maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, where a pickup truck, they're letting that truck continue on. They're letting that larger truck continue on, and they're taking a little bit less time than that. So it's been a great benefit for us to have those 5 cul-de-sac routes. Our fleet consists of 24 dump trucks. Most of them, I shouldn't say most of them, but 11 of them have wing plows that are very beneficial. They take a wider swath. They can take up probably another 3/4 of the width of a plow. So they're almost doubling up on their capacity for plowing. We have 2 road graders. They're both outfit with wing plows. The only drawback to road graders is they can't spread material. So that's, you got to have somebody follow up behind those units to spread material. We have 4 inloaders with plowing units. Again, they don't have material spreading capabilities, but they're a great benefit for us because they take a wide swath when they're plowing the snow. And then, of course, the 9 smaller truck plows that we have, and 5 of those would be in cul-de-sac routes. We have a couple smaller tonner trucks that we use, and they go up into the North Cedar Heights area, Shirley Stanley Street, some of them smaller streets that may be seal code or narrow streets, and they're taking care of those. And then I didn't mention here, but we also have lots of small equipment, some specialty equipment to take care of trails and sidewalks. Our costs, this last year that we had 32 snow events, 22, 23, we had 32 snow events. We had 6,411 staff hours. Probably 1,000, just over 1,000 of those staff hours are not included in the cost because they chose to use comp time instead of taking overtime. So that number would not show up as a cost at this time. So that would probably be more like 180,000, just if I had to guess on that. If you're looking at a true number for what they took in comp time. We used just over 2,000 tons of salt. Our salt's about $97 a ton. Salt brine, we use 30,000 gallons plus of salt brine. That material for us to manufacture costs about 47 cents per gallon for us to make that material. Just about 9,000 gallons of fuel, and then miscellaneous expenses such as plow blades, bolts, plow accessories, around $24,000. So you can kind of get an idea of what we spend, and this has been pretty much an average winter. And we'll talk a little bit about that, a little more about that here shortly. A little bit about efficiency. This is an example of one of our trucks of the major amount of plow equipment that we have are these single axle trucks. Like I said, 11 of them have wing plows, and they all have metered spreading capabilities on them. The single axle trucks get around town very nicely in terms of getting through residential streets, curb and back intersections, things like that. They're all articulated blades on them compared to years ago where all of our blades were fixed plow blades and you had no choice but to plow one direction. Telematics, this is huge for the supervisors. Having the ability to track your staff, track your plows where they're at. They can do that from the office. Once they set that up, they can see what streets have been done, what needs to be done. They can tell if the plow's up or down. They can tell how much material they're spreading. They can tell how fast that plow's going. So if we get a call and somebody's saying that we've got a plow going to the street at 50 mile an hour, we can go back and find out for sure what's going on. And if there is a problem, we're going to correct it. Otherwise, we're going to, maybe get back to that resident and let them know that here's what our telematics show us. That's a great tool for us to have. The ergonomic controls that they've got nowadays in these trucks are really nice for the operators. It makes them more comfortable throughout the night when they're plowing. I mean, it's nerve-wracking enough, it's stressful enough just being out there plowing, having the capability with the comfort of ergonomic controls is a great asset for us, for the staff. Here's an example of what we see when we're looking at our telematics. Most of this shows us clearing our arterial streets. Happens to be some garbage trucks mixed in there. This was one that actually showed our garbage, and it has to be a Thursday, as I know, because the purple is our Thursday routes for garbage, so they're mixed in there as well. But typically now we've got the garbage separated out of that, and we're doing just simply snow and ice control. We also have capabilities to track our sweepers and some of our other equipment with this during construction season. Talk a little bit about the environment. We try to be environmentally conscious with our snow and ice control, the amount of material we're spreading. We've got the ability to meter that now, so that's very important for us to make sure we're putting down the proper amounts. We use sodium chloride only. We do not use anything other than salt. We try not to use sand. The only time we'll use sand for our snow and ice control is if it's bitter cold and salt's not doing its job. So if we have some of that bonded ice on the pavement, we're going to go out and we're going to put sand on it. It's about the only choice we have. We're very conscious of our compliance with the MS4 and the NPDES permitting that we have, some of our requirements, and we have to report what we've used for material each year, so we're very conscious of that. The ground speed sensors make the difference. We're able to, with the ground speed, we can set that at a certain amount based on the conditions, and it's going to meter only that amount out, regardless of how fast you're going. Anti-icing, this really, we had a couple situations this year where we did some anti-icing prior to a snow event, and it really paid off. So that's a great tool for us. That's when we go out and we spray the pavement prior to an event coming in and get that salt brine dried up on the pavement, and then it prevents bonding. A pre-wet is another type of application we use for the brine, and that basically is spraying brine on the spinner as the material comes off the truck. And what that does is a couple things. That reduces bounce, so we don't get salt bouncing off the pavement. The other thing is it activates the salt quicker. Water activates salt. So that's also something that all of our trucks are outfitted with, and you have that spreading capabilities. We use this guide here, salt spreading rate guide. So for example, we have a pavement temperature of 30 to 40 degrees, and we know that the the pavement temperatures are going to come up, we may not do anything. We may not even put salt down. If it's just a wet snow that's coming down, we just need to scrape it off of there. Most times we do use salt, but not very much. We'll try to keep it down below 100 pounds per lane mile. Conversely, if we're out and we've got temperatures that are 15 to 20 degrees and maybe falling, we're gonna bump that up quite a bit. We're gonna bump that up so we can keep that from bonding and having to go out multiple times trying to treat that bonded ice on the pavement. Example of our salt brine storage. The top left is our storage at 2200 Technology. That's our main facility. We typically order 3,000 tons per year. That's our normal order. However, with our milder snow and our milder winter last winter, we were able to reduce that by 1,000 tons this year. So we only ordered 2,000 tons this year. We're fortunate that the DOT, the Department of Transportation, does all the legwork for us on that. I think it's important to point out that they do all the bidding work. We just give them our quantities, they do the bid work, and then let us know. They get the pricing, and then we let them know whether or not we're going to accept that. The other salt dome is the one we've had for several years. Back in the 90s, that was built down at 1500 Bluff. That's also got capabilities for salt brine filling station. All of our salt brine is made in-house. This is our salt brine production machine here. And it's very important. We've got several staff members that are trained specifically for this because we got to make sure that our salinity level, our percentage of salt in that water is 23%. You go a little bit above that, then it reduces the effectiveness of the salt brine quite a bit. So we want to make sure we're right there in that 23% range. You can go a little less and you're okay to a certain degree, but if you have more salt than is needed or more salt than what is called for, you could have real problems and it can turn on you in a hurry. These are our applicators that we spread that brine with. Typically, we've got, this requires a Class A CDL. We've got 5 or 6 guys in it that know this and know how to operate them, and, and they do a good job of getting out on the roads and making sure they get good application. These are also metered units that we can meter the amount being distributed through the controls in the cab. Snow hauling, it comes after all of the fun of plowing. So 3 areas. Parkade, College Hill, and High School. This year we had only 2 large events for hauling, 2 overnight events. The high school, we probably, I think we did 3 or 4 occasions of the high school. So took about 650 staff hours, 550 gallons of fuel. It cost us about $16,000. Now, I will say that both applications or both events that we hauled from, there wasn't a lot of snow. So we have not seen a huge amount of snow for our hauling like we've had in the past. If we had more quantity of snow, obviously the costs are going to go up. This is basically a map of our downtown area and what streets we haul off of downtown. We got the Parkade, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. We do Washington. We do State, and then we go up to Overland Park on 2nd, and then around City Hall on Clay. College Hill, we basically do College Street and 23rd Street. So we go up College Hill and then turn west on 23rd, and we typically go to the multimodal when we haul snow from up there. And of course, Division Street, CFHS, maybe one more year, we'll be done with that. Here's just an example of our hauling. Like I said, it takes about 15 trucks, 14 trucks. They get in a line, they get behind the blower, and they wait their turn. Here's an example of the blower putting it into the back of the truck. The guys got to kind of be on their toes when they get up next to that blower so that they're not bumping into the side of the blower and not getting snow blown over the top of the cab. So there's a little skill involved in it. Our snow hauling equipment, we use 2 motor graders, 3 unloaders, 4 skid loaders. The loaders typically are pulling the material off of the street or off of the the parking into the street. Then the motor graders take over and they'll windrow that, and then the beast of blower comes in and it loads it up into the trucks. We're very fortunate that we have quality equipment, and council has approved that in the past. It makes a big difference. It makes a big difference for the staff. It makes a big difference for efficiency. Getting this new snow blower has cut our time hauling the snow probably, I would say, by an hour or two, because it's just so much more efficient than the older one we had. So it's equipment is huge, but our number one reason that we're successful is our staff, our dedicated staff. They come in on, like I said, there's no incentive for them to be on call. They get their overtime when they come in. We got a dedicated group of guys that are proud of what they do, and I'm very proud of what they do. With that, I'll take questions.
All right, I believe that there's no public comment involved this evening, so there's questions from the council. Mr. Sires?
Yeah. Brian, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your 42 years of service to this city. That's amazing. That's a long, long time, as you well know.
Seems like yesterday.
Yeah, and you remember what a beautiful day yesterday was. So I'm amazed at all the work that you guys do. And it's like I've always said, you can make the city look as good as they want to spend. So when they look toward residential streets, if they want them scraped, you can do that, but it just costs more money. I think you do an excellent job and provide good economic service to the city, and I appreciate all the things that all you guys do down there. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think I echo Dave's support of your staff and the work you do and have done over all these years, and enjoyed, if the folks haven't seen the Dave Sires report live from Mr. Heath's truck on Facebook, it's worth the watch just for that. So Mr. Dustin, do you have a, okay.
No, I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. I would echo the sentiments. I was impressed with this presentation, and it didn't dawn on me until this presentation, all of the complexity of the things that you guys orchestrate and the staff hours and the dedication of training and preparation that goes into this. So I very much appreciate it. I mean, we hear from residents with a perspective from time to time, and we're well informed by this presentation to be able to let them know that their concerns are heard and we are trying to address those. And I think we do a fantastic job. So I appreciate you and your team's service. I was wowed by this presentation of just how much you do. So thanks for that.
So my division's open anytime for residents, for council, anybody that would like to come out and take a look at our, not just snow and ice control, but what we do construction-wise. We've come a long ways over the past 40 years since I've been here with some of the techniques, some of the quality of work, the equipment. It's very beneficial to have, like I said, to have a willing council that's willing to get us what we need to do the job so we can do it good.
Other questions? I have just a couple, not to romanticize about, hey, back in the day, this is how it was, to Dustin's point about people saying, hey, how come this isn't done? Was there a time that we did do bare, down to the bare on every street, or is that just kind of romanticized and you think, hey, I remember this being this way?
Since I've been involved with the supervision and the management of snow and ice control, we've always had that guideline of 3-inch policy on residential streets. I will say the big difference now from then is, like I said, we got a capability of putting material down when we're out in the residential streets. So a lot of times, unless the weather turns terrible on us, we're able to get them residentials cut down pretty good. There are times where we've had snowpack that the blade just goes over top of, and there's not a whole lot you can do with that. You can put material down, but typically it won't penetrate. So the key is to get out there early, get out there and get it done. But when you get a long duration snow event, it's very difficult. You don't want to expend all your resources early on in that event, because what do you do when the snow stops? Everybody's exhausted. So you kind of got to really pick and choose your time when you go, and that's the tricky part.
And it gets to be a season too where, yeah, the streets end up being bare because the temperature changed, and it may be shortly after a snow storm, but the streets ended up being bare because more maybe weather related than plow and treatment related.
Well, and a comment on that, I saw that we had 34 inches of snow this year, which is pretty average. It's a pretty average winter. However, probably 10 inches or so of that snow we had to do nothing with. It was coming down. It was on the turf. It was sticking. On driveways it was sticking, but on the streets not necessarily. Maybe because there was residual salt. Maybe it's just the pavement temperatures. But there's a couple of events where we were getting snow and we just watched it snow. In fact, recently we sent the trucks out thinking, oh my, here we go. And about 15 minutes later, we called them back because, hey, it's all melting off the street. It looked like we were in for it, but then it kind of lightened up and that pavement temperature caught up with that snow and melted it off. So that was unusual for me.
Susan, did you have? Another question that I believe each of us have gotten at some point is the determination. You made mention a few times in your presentation of snow removal on trails. I see Mr. White is here. What's the determination of what trails are going to be snowshoeing, snow skiing, and which ones are going to be plowed for removal?
Well, we worked with the Bike Ped Committee, and there was a presentation, I'm not sure when it was, but I think it was last fall or whenever, that we talked about the trails that we were going to clear, and we came up with a list of those trails, and I can't name them individually, but there were several that were added, and some of them are going to be done like on a priority basis, where there's levels of service that we're going to provide based on the conditions, based on what snow events may be coming in, and that type of thing. But we've got a pretty good amount of trails that we're doing. It's pretty extensive. Like I said, it's about 20 miles of trails that we're clearing now. There is concern from some residents where they want to have them trails covered with snow. We work with CVAS, the Cedar Valley Area Biking Group. They have a groomer now, so they like to come out. Big Woods Lake, for example, they groom that area. They'll go through Washington Park and groom that, and then they'll go off into George Wythe Park or Hartman Reserve. So there's opportunity there for people that want to get out and snowshoe and cross-country ski, fat bike, whatever their deal is.
All right, I'll kind of put you on the spot with this last one. It's kind of a two-part. What do you think your group does the best?
Everything.
With that being said,
In terms of snow and ice control, I think I got to hand it to the supervisors. Like I said, they're the first ones here, last ones to leave. We're in the office together. We're all deciding what to do. I may come up with an idea that they think is crazy, and I'll think about it and say, yeah, you're right. That's not a good idea. So we work really close together and make sure that we're all on the same page. And I think they've hit the nail on the head this winter.
so the follow-up to that is there's no promises being made here, but what's the thing that you think, boy, if we had this, or if we did something this way, it could really be a game changer for us, or at least an improvement?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm not sure. More staff, more equipment, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the common answer, I guess. But I do, again, I have to hand it to the dedication of our staff showing up, Christmas, holidays, nights, weekends, to come in and do the work. Like I said, they don't have any extra incentive other than the overtime they're getting. So I think it's their dedication, and I think there's good morale in operations and maintenance.
Reflective of the leadership, I say, in your area. All right.
Mr. Chair, just real quick, Brian, would you comment? You mentioned Christmas there, and I think it should really be noted what our staff did over this holiday season, because it was supposed to be a 4-day weekend, and I think a if you
Yeah.
comment on that.
Excuse me. Yeah, we ended up with a blizzard over the holiday, if you can recall that, and we had staff working almost every day except for, I believe it was Christmas Day, they got a break. But then they were right back at it, and they may have even been on Christmas Day, but that whole period of time, I think we had staff out just almost every day. And then we had a fairly large fire on Cottage Row that we were helping with. We had a staff member and a plow out there keeping that road, salted down, so, because they had their tanks set up in the middle of the road, and we were keeping that from icing up from the hydrant to, they're porting water over. So we had a staff member there, and we had others out doing drift control. So yeah, we had, and not to mention the countless hours the supervisors put in that weekend too.
Did you have another, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So this year was it was a good year, and I don't really have any issues, or didn't hear many issues from residents, which is always good about the snow clearing. The one issue I did hear pop up just once is someone who lives on kind of a corner street, and the snow gets built up around like their mailbox and their driveway, to where I saw some pictures that it was over. What do we have capability wise to deal with that, or is that a common occurrence? Or
Well, I'm glad you bring it up. That's a good question. I know Jamie's going to be discussing that here shortly. During our plow training, we talked to all the staff about trying to wrap that snow around an intersecting sidewalk, try to wrap that around and keep that brunt of that snow from being pushed up against a sidewalk. Driveways, we try to split the snow down the center of the street and bring equal amounts to both sides. Excuse me. There's not a whole lot we can do with that. It's got to go out to the edge of the road, and unfortunately, driveways typically bear the brunt of that windrow. There's really not a whole lot we can do with that, but we do emphasize in our training to try to keep that snow as they're curbing away from them intersecting sidewalks. And just for example, I will point out too that, like in the core of town where we're typically intersecting residential streets, they don't curb every one of them intersections. They'll go straight through. It would take them forever if they had to curb every intersection. So what they do is they when they get to an arterial or a collector street, that's where they're going to do most of their curbing. Say, for example, they're coming down 8th Street and they get to Main. They're going to curb that material there. But typically the rest of 8th Street, all the way up to the other side, they're going to go straight through. And likewise with the north-south streets. But not a lot we can do with the driveways. We try to make sure that we're splitting it equally to each side.
thank you.
Yes, Darryl.
Quick comment. Brian, you do a knock-up job, and your team is phenomenal. I experienced a ride-along when I was first on council, and if anybody hasn't done that yet, you should do it. I was quite impressed and was very curious when I started the ride-along how efficient the roundabouts are to plow and how beneficial they are to the whole operation and the flow of snow removal for the city. So just point for the roundabouts.
Yeah, just to touch on that, you're right. Our staff, they have no problem with roundabouts because they're never having to stop. They're never having, for example, let's take Valley Park and University for an example. The roundabout near there, I guess it's Boulder, but they can continue around that until they get it clear and then they move on. When we would do that during a commute, they would have to wait for traffic. They have to curb it right there, and then they're waiting for a clear area, which rarely came when it was evening commute. So now they're going around. The only trouble we really have now with that particular area is when we come off of the roundabout and we go to the south into the College Square area, for example, or Blackhawk Village, finding a place to deposit that snow. So that's been a little tricky, but I think the guys got it figured out now. It took a year or so, but then one of the things that we look at in the fall before we, actually get snow is where are we going to put it? What do we got for obstacles? What do we got for utilities, for water hydrants, things like that.
Yeah, and to Simon's point, I've experienced the complaining citizen with the sidewalk intersections, and I brought some to your attention this year, so it's do as good as you can, I guess, right?
You know, if we get large quantities, and then we get a break in the weather, we're gonna go out and we're gonna clean up intersections. Sight distance is number one, for sure, for safety. And then if we've got one that's just completely blocked that somebody can't get through, we're gonna go out and we'll scoop that material off of there, haul it away.
Do a great job.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is related to Community Development Committee, and who's the chair on that?
That would be me.
Do you need this equipment?
No, I'll take the coffee. Yeah, sure. No, I'm good. Thank you, though. All right, we're going to talk about code enforcement and as it pertains to the private snow removal code revisions and discussion. And I believe it's going to be Jamie Castle coming up for a presentation. Welcome.
Good evening. Let me get this set up real quick. Good evening. I'm here to talk about snow removal and code enforcement, specifically sidewalks adjacent to private property. This is coming from 2 years of code enforcement experience and some issues that we have come across and some changes that we potentially would like to make. The main topics that we'd like to discuss changes are reorganization and consolidation, define internal responsibilities, update terminology, timeliness of removal, and the extent of the property owner's responsibility. The first one is a pretty simple one. We have duplicate ordinance sections, 19.4 and 19.185. Say virtually the same thing. One is a little bit longer. We would like to consolidate so that we have one code section and there's not confusion with the duplicates. 19.185 is more complete. The next item is defining the internal responsibilities. Currently, there are references to Public Works Director, City Engineer, and Public Works staff. Currently, all of that work is done underneath Community Development and with a private contractor. We'd like to change it to city staff so that if there are future changes, it's still clear that it's simply city staff that is completing the work. Update on terminology. This is where it gets to be a little more complicated. So right now, our ordinance says natural accumulation of snow and ice. We would like to change that simply to snow and ice. And the reason for that is clarity. We have some property owners who don't believe that they have to clear snow that is placed there by a snowplow, and that does create some consistency issues. As you see in this image here, this is actually right next to each other. One was cleared, one was not, so it wasn't necessarily an issue of being able to do it. It was simply that it was not done. We did look at other communities in the area, and from what we found, nobody uses the term natural accumulation. Everything is either snow, ice, and accumulation, or just snow and ice. So for consistency, not only in our own ordinance, but across the board, we'd like to look at changing that so that it's one term and it's used consistently. Timeliness of removal. This actually is a two-part one. The first item is wanting to change it so that we actually have a defined time. Currently, our ordinance says reasonable amount of time, which can be defined in many, many different ways, depending on who you're talking to. So we'd like to add in that it's within the 48 hours of the snow event. We have had several issues of people responding that our timeline isn't fair because their reasonable does not match our reasonable. It also was reviewed underneath the 2022 Black Hawk County Pedestrian Master Plan, and it did point out we are one of the only communities that does not have a defined time. So we would like to change that to the 48 hours, which is our current policy, but it's actually in writing and clear for all. In addition to defining the timeline, we also want to change our notification process. Currently with our notification process, we do send out a letter. So what happens is the snow ends, 2 days later we inspect, we send out a letter giving them 2 days from the date of the letter to have the snow removed. If it is not, then we have our contractor remove it. There are a few problems with this. The first is that amount of time. We get a lot of complaints about, well, it just takes too long for you guys to act on this. I've been walking that sidewalk, it's slippery now, it's packed down. So hopefully with a different method, it could slow down, or it could shorten that time. Also, we've had the opposite complaint. We've sent out a notice and someone didn't receive it. And so we went and cleared their sidewalk and they were unaware that they were going to receive a notice and had to do that. So it covers 2 issues. Excuse me. This was also in the 2022 Blackhawk County Pedestrian Master Plan notes, stating that the process is a little clunky. What we'd like to propose is that instead of using a letter, we actually place notice on the property. Waterloo currently does this with a sticker, and it seems to be working really well with notice. The sticker would not only be placed on the property, but it would also list when we inspected and when they had to comply by. Extent of property owner's responsibility. One of the items that we have an issue with right now is defining what has to be cleared. The ordinance does say that the sidewalk needs to be cleared. Some people interpret that as a path. We interpret it as the complete sidewalk. We would like to add in the ordinance actual verbiage that says the complete width of the sidewalk. And then corners. We know that this is a potential conflict item. We have 2 sorts of complaints. One is that it is difficult to remove. Others are of safety. We will see sidewalks clear, but people walking in the street because they can't get over the corners. And so what we want to require is that those corners are cleared, even if it is left with a snowplow. It provides a safe access, and people are able to stay on the sidewalks rather than on the streets. Sorry about that. We understand that it can be difficult to remove the snow, so we would be willing to look at alternative options. These are 2 examples. One is at Papa John's. The snow is piled really high right on that sidewalk, but they have an adjacent parking lot. So the option would be if they could provide a safe path through the parking lot. The other one is a residential corner, and they were not able to get through that at the ramp, so they created 2 adjacent options through the right-of-way. Ideally, we want to keep the path on the sidewalk. It was designed where it is for purpose, but we understand there are going to be times that they can't. The final item is the extent of the property owner's responsibility in regards to rear sidewalks. We have several locations that have front and rear sidewalks, or even only rear sidewalks. Our our ordinance says that all sidewalks adjacent to a property are the responsibility of the property owner, but we're finding that we're having some difficulties getting the rear sidewalks cleared. What we're asking for is support from the council in order to enforce the removal of sidewalks in the rear. So what I'm asking for today is a motion to direct staff to revise appropriate sections of the code to address reorganization and consolidation, update terminology, define internal responsibilities, timelines of removal, and extent of property owner's responsibility. I do know that Bike Ped is here and would like to speak on this topic if that would be allowed, but prior to that, I would take any questions that you may have.
All right, we'll open it up. Yes, Councilmember DeBurr.
Some properties, the sidewalk is actually trail. So when it's trail, it shouldn't be required to be removed.
Correct. This is specifically to sidewalks. We know that there is a difference between the trails and the sidewalks.
So if someone is wondering whether their sidewalk behind their house is a trail or not, isn't it simply by the width of it that they can tell? Isn't the trails are like 2 feet wider?
It is defined by the width of the trail. The trails are wider, yes. The ones that I had for examples, those were specifically sidewalks.
Councilmember Cruz.
Thank you. I guess this example that you are showing in the slide deck on Waterloo Road is one that I've heard from a citizen several times, that the sidewalk was designed, unfortunately, right next to the road, and it piles right on top of it. And you're saying you can, or I was told, you can have an alternate route, maybe the length of this. So does the person have to get that approved, or can they just start? Like this case, the parking lot runs parallel to this little retaining wall and the sidewalk that gets covered all the time. So what's the procedure so they don't get ticketed under this new policy?
We would like to have a discussion with, if someone's doing an alternative route, the first time, we definitely would want to have a discussion so that we aren't sending it. We have a very nice and robust computer system that we would be able to track that and be able to identify what one. So if we get a phone call or a complaint,
Okay. The other thing, looking at the situation on South Main and Hudson, where you have front and back, and the back sidewalk is behind fencing and that sort of thing, so there's not easy access unless they drive completely around to get to it. And you also have a scenario where there's very, very low pedestrian activity on that sidewalk. If a person could, in some way, find sections that you basically abandon the snow removal when there's virtually no traffic and make it a pseudo trail, I think that would be helpful to the citizens there.
yeah, the reason that we brought up South Main is we have been getting significantly more complaints on that one with all of the new businesses and the fire station over there. We are seeing track every single time it snows, we're seeing them. And the way that we're looking at it is they have to mow the right of way. So how are they accessing that with the mower? Would it be the same way with a shovel or a snowplow or snow blower?
Okay, then what about Hudson Road when you get really south of town and you're getting into kind of a no man's land, you think? I'm just wondering if there's places that we could look at individually and the citizens might be able to petition to say, let's just abandon that section.
I think that would definitely could be a discussion. The areas that we focus on when we are inspecting really come down to high-use pedestrian areas and complaints.
Mr. or Chair Harding.
Councilmember
Councilman
Dunn?
Harding, yes, yes. Okay, so kind of to piggyback off that, so I live close to Waterloo Road in the area that, one of the areas that we're talking about. I guess my thing with those folks, I mean, I can be kind of empathetic to them, but you bought the house knowing that that's the situation for the sidewalk. So I guess I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. Like, you purchased the home. It's common knowledge that you clear sidewalks. They are clearly sidewalks. The one on South Main is very narrow. I know people like to use it as a trail, but it is not a trail. It is a sidewalk. And so I guess as a person who, you know, in my neighborhood, there's like sections of no sidewalk and whatnot. And I live by the Old Valley Park School, which is thankfully used as a business that can be used or that is needed. But I guess my point is for those folks and businesses that don't clear their sidewalks, I'm not okay with the excuse of, well, the snowplow pushes it over. I mean, you have a business or it's your home. It's your responsibility. And when my kid or my neighbor's kid or whoever's kid or whoever has to walk on a street because you don't maintain your sidewalk, I have a big problem with that. So I guess I'm ranting, but I am for anything that can keep our pedestrians, especially those who need the most support in being safe, safe. So, yeah, I'm just kind of piggybacking off that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Canfield?
First, I want to thank you for the initiative to get this cleaned up. I think obviously part of cleanup of the snow is to clean up the ordinance. So the fact that we've got outdated redundancy and ambiguity there, I'm for cleaning it up and getting it correct. I would like to take out of it the subjectivity as much as possible. So just take that note that we'd like to say, hey, if there's going to be an approval method for alternate routes, for example, I'd want to have that known so that the residents can say, hey, this is my plan, I know it's going to work, and I won't be fined for it. I'd like to see if that clarity can be provided. I think there's still going to be some, argumentation that could happen. I don't want to get ahead of any other discussion, but I think some of the discussion we've started talking about is which trails to provide what activity on, and I believe the Bike Ped Committee does have that mapped out for us. We've talked about it and approved that map to say, hey, these will be plowed in half or in full for this purpose or that. A concern that was brought up by Mr. Scholl earlier is what of those that are trail width but are still functional sidewalks for folks that have ADA accessibility concerns? Can we address that in this code revision as well?
One item that we discussed and thought about bringing up, but weren't 100% sure how to move forward with, is what happens when it is a sidewalk or a trail in lieu of a sidewalk. So specifically in residential areas where they have kindly put in a trail, which is wonderful because we have this great system and we wanted to interconnect, but then they didn't have the sidewalk that everyone else has. Could we look at doing a requirement that a sidewalk width is removed? We did not include that in this, but it is something that if it is of interest and council directs us to, we could look at that.
Other questions before we? Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
I guess I want to compare and contrast the policy we have for streets versus sidewalk. We do not have a bare pavement policy for the street. The policy on the sidewalk is what, bare? Or can you have a half-inch of snow coming and it freezes hard and it doesn't melt for a number of days?
That,
there's always tons of variables in snowfalls.
and I'll admit that is a gray area. We attempt to have everything cleared, but we understand that realistically there are times, especially a path that has been traveled and has been really packed down. When we have our snow removal company come through, our policy for them is down to the sidewalk, but even they come back to us and sometimes it's not feasible. So we do work depending on the weather. We have to have some variables in it, some gray
Sure.
area.
So, and then getting back to this Waterloo Road scenario, when you're plowing salted material in the street, and it creates a pretty dense obstacle to clear, and you're saying you are allowing workarounds. This is a scenario that I've been approached for years on, and as probably most of the city has seen this one. I think there's importance there to develop maybe a guideline for the workarounds in a couple cases, particularly when the sidewalk is right next to the street.
And most of our workarounds, when I discussed that, was primarily for those corners. I wasn't necessarily prepared to talk about the Waterloo Road one, but I do see the concern there. In that example, we wanted to use it because they were right next door to each other on the exact same day, and one was able to clear it. We often hear, well, the snowplow put it there, I'm not able to move it, it's too heavy. But we feel like by using the term natural accumulation, that was being used as an excuse not to clear.
Sure.
So that example is more primarily towards the ability to clear it versus not.
Right. Well, whatever we revise for terminology on this type of scenario, I mean, the sidewalk is right there. And there should be a workaround language for that. The other comment or question, when you have a property that's vacant, posting a notice on the door doesn't do any good. You need to be mailing a letter when you have a vacant property?
We did discuss that. There are going to be times where we'll have to mail a letter if we haven't gotten notice to them. Our policy and our ordinance right now requires us to only send for the first snow removal. So we would, if we know the property is vacant. There are times that we don't know that. So we will do our due diligence to determine whether the property owner can be reached or not. But it would just depend on what we can see
You
and
can tell if there's
know.
no footprints or no driver
Right.
tire marks. But then are we migrating towards this definition or little picture you have here of Waterloo policy, 48 hours after the snow to clear, and then another 24 after notice? Is that kind of the direction you're going?
That would be the direction we'd want to go, correct.
Okay.
And if we had to mail a letter instead, we'd use our old policy if we had to do a letter in the vacant circumstance.
Okay. What is the approximate cost of, what will the city charge? And it's probably just by hour to
It is, yep,
clear?
it's an hourly rate plus city time. Typically, we're seeing about $100 per property. There are some that are much more extensive because they haven't removed all winter. But typically, I think I've been seeing about $96.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Not really questions, just maybe just by way of a public service announcement. If there are properties that need services done, Boy Scouts or some other group could set up a business card and hand that to these so they don't get dinged with $100 and local kids get some money. But in that same vein, I wanted to make sure that we're not encouraging people to throw a ton of salt on to get all the ice melt. I mean, Mr. Heath just said we're very compliant with MS4 and all those things. We don't want to have a whole bunch of runoff from that regard, but I would like to have some policy that says, here's how an alternate route could be. If I'm not mistaken, Channel 15 did that this last year, right? At the corner where there's piles that cover the sidewalk, it said, if you can't get through this, make an alternate route. But we want those to be accessible, correct? So this new ordinance would say, here's the manner in which we deem them.
Correct, and it would be difficult to have an accessible route as an alternate route. I mean, because you're going to be coming off of a curb on almost every single alternate route, but still trying to keep as many people on the sidewalk or the right-of-way as opposed to the street would be our ultimate goal.
Would there be, just one last follow-up question, would there be any benefit to a collaboration between the Public Works to send out some of that smaller equipment with a more powerful snow thrower in the instance we have large accumulations over the winter to get that cleaned off one time after that big event in those days in between? Is that something, a conversation that you're open to?
It would be a conversation we would have to have. I don't know how many corners, how much time,
Sure.
so on.
Cool.
All right. Well, I'd entertain, before public comment, I'd like to be in a motion. So,
Well,
I'd entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'd motion that we direct staff to revise appropriate sections to accomplish these purposes. How do you want that motion read, Kim?
It's on the last page.
Yeah. To address those bullet points: reorganization and consolidation, update terminology, define internal responsibilities, the timeliness of removals, and the extent of the property owner's responsibilities.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. With that, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone who wants to come forward is welcome to. Yes, ma'am. Name and address for the record.
My name's Janice King, and I live at 1422 College Street. I live at the bottom of College Street, so when they have a lot of snow and I get all the ice and everything, in my younger days, I could get it, but some days I've had piles on the corner up to my waist. I used to have a big snowblower. I'm now able to do it. I just have a little 22-inch. And then if I go to the right, I can't make a path that way because it's all taller yet. If I go to the other way, there's a stop sign. So then I'd have to go about 5 or 6 feet that way. So I'm no longer able to do it. So I've lived there forever. So now you're saying, okay, that's all right. We'll charge you $100. I've already cleaned my sidewalk every morning. I'd be out there between 5 and 6, and then go to work. You guys come along, plow it, and now here I have all this that I'm not able to move. So I guess that's where my concern is. I live on College. I don't know how many people you guys come down, and all the ends are full.
So when you say the ends are full, could you?
Well, where the sidewalk is, you know, when you come
I get
from
you.
block to block.
Yes, ma'am. I understand what you mean. Gotcha.
Crisscross corner.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, but there's no sidewalks on the other side of the street, but we can never plow it over there. We always have to do my side that comes down from the hill or the one across. So here I get all this and I'm not able to do it. And I'm a widow, no kids, so.
I understand your concern. So I would say this. One, the motion that we're looking at right now is just going to be to clear up some language. We're not going to actually add anything in that wasn't in there before. And two, if you would like to set up, we could get a meeting with Brian and see, and look at your situation specifically to see if there is a way that we could not have it pile up on your side.
Because at the part, the way she's talking,
Yeah.
I can't do that either.
So-
before I shoveled it, I stood at the end of my sidewalk so they couldn't plow.
I understand. So,
Clever.
well,
I could care less about my driveway, but that sidewalk, I'm on College and it's a main, so my best thing is I just stand at the corner and they can't plow there. So that's just my concern with this new rules and everything, which is, I think it's great because I'm a walker and I don't like that I can't walk on the sidewalks.
well, so like I said, with the ordinance right now, we're just going to clear up and clarify things. So we're not going to add anything. So it's going to be the same rules. And we have your address, so we can have someone reach out to you, and then we can see what's possible to help you out. Because the goal is not to, stick you with 6 feet of snow. I promise. Okay.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Andrew Schroll, 930 Newman Avenue, but I'm going to speak today on behalf of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I think everything was well covered. I'd just like to, walk through a few things from the Bike Ped Committee's perspective. One note up front, there were some questions on what is marked for trail clearing, what we established with Public Works, and that was reviewed at goals setting, I think last fall, the most recent update to that. And there's actually a really excellent map that clarifies that. It's available online, linked to a couple different places, and I'm sure we can pass that around. I'd also like to express appreciation for Public Works and their snow removal efforts, roads, trails, walkways, underpasses by city buildings, parking lots. It really adds up to a lot of effort on their part, and likewise, homeowners, business owners. It's a lot of effort on their part with large snowfalls. It can be tough, but it's well worth the community effort. So I want to say thank you to everyone in the community for snow removal as well. And of course, safety and practicality are important considerations for taking on this task, such as going around the piles, on corners, and trucks doing their best in the first place to avoid piling on the corners. In response to the proposal for the ordinance updates, we want to voice our full support for those. Each winter, there are currently far more footprints in snowy sidewalks and deep intersection snow piles than there should be. I often see pedestrians of all ages struggling to navigate crossings, and walking down the sidewalk, one is likely to encounter obstacles. So the biggest thing is clarifying the ordinance can help with both getting the education out there of responsibilities and streamlining the enforcement of it. So part of it was full width clearing. That's important for accessibility for all. That needs to go into the winter as well. And again, the footprints themselves indicate that the need is there. Additionally, I'd like to address what Council Member Ganfield brought up earlier about the multi-use trails that are there in lieu of sidewalks. So these are 8 to 10 feet wide in-town sidewalks, but they're classified as trails even though they're also used as sidewalks. So some of these are residential, some are along commercial areas, and some of them are actually cleared by especially some commercial property owners, and that's really great, but some are not. As we were talking about with the trail map, the city does clear some of those, but some are left uncleared. So the key areas I'd like to focus on include South Main, south of Green Hill, the Prairie Parkway area, Viking Road shopping area, and then part of West University Avenue. Just looking at the map of where the city is not currently clearing of those 8 to 10 foot trails, there's really not too many places we need to focus on. And so I think if we could address that through the code changes, that would really help. Ideally, the full width would be cleared, but potential compromise would be clearing at least 5 foot of that width so that we can ensure that we maintain walkability for families, students, and dog walkers year round. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
Anyone else from the public before we bring it back to council? All right. That being said, is there any last stuff from council? Obviously, with this motion, we've got a lot of, we're trying to provide clarity, but we've also got some other things that we've thrown around, food for thought for staff. So I think the next step would be to bring something forward and we can talk about it more. But, yes, sir. Councilmember Cyrus.
When they talk about natural snowfall, and then as the plows go by, it really hardly seems fair to have the homeowner shovel off everything that's been pushed off the street. I think we need to be careful about that. You know, it went from saying that it was natural snowfall, and then all these different places that they've talked about, once you hit that stuff with the plow goes quite a long ways, throws it off onto the sidewalks. That's quite a burden onto a lot of these homeowners. I think we need to be very careful when we start to tread on that. That's all.
I can understand where you're coming from, but we have the clear streets, and
No,
and guess who shovels Waterloo Road?
I understand.
Me, because I live there.
saying.
I can say for you, certain you do, because I walk there. Thank you.
So I don't shovel every person's house, but I try to go out there and I walk all the way around, down Virgil, down Hawthorne, onto there, and then I help shovel the people's snow if I can.
Well, that's because it's still a novelty to you because you've come from the south.
It's my way of exercise. Councilmember Cruz.
Interesting comments there. But I guess I have a question for Mr. Schrage. At goal setting, I brought up the idea of having a QR code for the trails so that people can readily identify what's going to be plowed and what's going to be snowshoed, left snow. Are we moving along? I think Intercog had something going. You're coordinating that?
Yep, we're working with Intercog. They're going after a grant that would potentially fund all of the vinyl stickers. We have some samples made, and we're working with them on that. Hopefully, if we receive the grant, that they will be installed here early summer.
Okay. And then kind of a side note, are we developing something for parking lots and parking spots in the downtown part of the city similar?
Correct. We'd want a consistent vinyl sticker, so whatever we land on with the trail one will get some produced for the parking. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions on moving forward with this ordinance and looking at those changes? All right. This will be a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That passes. And it looks like we are 5 minutes till the hour, so this meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you at the top of the hour.